Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to give up pieces of yourself just to keep them happy? Imagine pouring your heart and soul into a relationship, giving everything you have, only to be met with indifference and subtle disdain. This is the story of a man who once believed in a love that would last forever, only to find himself questioning his worth, doubting his every move, and feeling lost in a relationship that left him empty. In this video, we'll journey through his experience, a painful yet powerful story that reveals profound lessons on self-worth, dignity, and the strength it takes to walk away. We'll explore the silent erosion of confidence that comes from seeking approval where it can't be found, and the courage needed to reclaim one's identity when love becomes toxic. Stay with us as we delve into 5 life-changing lessons that can help anyone struggling with self-worth in a relationship. Each lesson offers a beacon of hope and a reminder that true love, whether with someone else or within yourself, always respects and uplifts. Watch until the end. You may find insights that could transform your own life, especially if you're facing the challenge of finding peace and self-acceptance in a world that doesn't always see your worth. Let's explore together the strength, resilience, and self-love that emerge from even the most painful experiences. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. Now, let's get started. In those tender early days, he poured his entire being into her, making her happiness his life's mission. Every morning, he woke with a sense of purpose, determined to be the man who could fulfill her every desire, the one who could make her feel cherished and adored beyond measure. She became his world, the very center of his existence. He adored her with a devotion he had never felt for anyone else, lavishing her with attention, kindness, and the gentleness of a heart eager to please. He spared no effort in treating her like the queen he believed her to be, convinced that she was his second chance at love, a gift life had given him when he thought such joy was beyond reach. In her presence, he felt a rare peace, a sense of belonging that made his life feel rich and full, like he had finally found something genuine and enduring. She was his reason, his light, his hope for happiness in his later years. Yet as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, an almost imperceptible shift began to creep into their relationship. Her requests, at first gentle and playful, began to grow in number and weight. Small demands, hardly noticeable at first, carried a subtle edge that hinted at something more, a faint sense of superiority woven into her words. Initially, he brushed it aside, thinking it was merely her way of expressing herself, a quirk of her personality, perhaps even part of the charm that had drawn him to her in the first place. But with each passing day, her requests took on a sharper tone, as though she was beginning to see him not as an equal partner but as someone needing guidance, someone beneath her. She would offer advice with a dismissive air, her words tinged with a condescending undertone that left him feeling small, but he chose to ignore it, convincing himself that her intentions were good, that she only wanted to help. But the cracks in his resolve widened as her subtle criticisms grew more frequent and more pointed. What had once been playful suggestions turned into barbed comments that left little room for laughter. Her humor, once warm and inviting, now bore a biting edge, and her once loving words began to echo with disdain. She would remark, sometimes under the guise of concern, that he should take better care of himself, that men his age should pay attention to their health and appearance. "You don't want to look so old," she'd say, with a casual cruelty that cut him to the core. He laughed along at first, trying to hide the hurt, pretending her words didn't sting. But as the months slipped by, he could no longer ignore the growing ache inside him. Each comment chipped away at his confidence, each remark eroded his sense of self-worth, until he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about their love. It was as if she was reminding him, again and again, that he was too old, too out of touch, too far from what she truly desired. What hurt the most was the way she cloaked her criticism in a veil of concern, making it difficult for him to respond. It was as if she was saying, "I'm only trying to help," even as her words tore him down. He began to doubt himself, to wonder if perhaps she was right. Perhaps he wasn't enough for her. Perhaps he was failing to live up to some unspoken expectation. Her words lingered in his mind, haunting him, planting seeds of self-doubt that grew into a tangled web of insecurity. He found himself bending over backward to please her, to prove his worth, to show her that he could still be the man she needed. But the final blow came in the most intimate, vulnerable part of their relationship. What had once been a realm of closeness and shared affection became the stage for her most brutal attacks. She told him with cold indifference that he lacked the passion, the spontaneity, the vigor of a younger man. Her words were clinical, stripped of emotion, as though she were delivering an objective assessment rather than shattering his heart. She left him feeling broken, exposed, stripped of the pride he had once felt as a man. Each word was a dagger, each criticism a fresh wound, leaving him raw, hollow, and questioning his own worth. What had once been a source of joy now felt like a burden, a reminder of his inadequacies. And with every passing day, he felt himself slipping further from the love he had once believed would be his salvation, left with nothing but the echoes of her disdain. He had always believed that he could offer her something far deeper, something profound and enduring beyond the shallow appeal of physical passion. In his heart, he yearned to build a connection rooted in emotional intimacy, the kind of bond that could weather any storm and bring them both peace and comfort. He poured himself into her, hoping that his love would provide her a haven of safety and warmth. To him, love was a sanctuary, something precious and rare that few people ever find. He saw his devotion as a gift, something that transcended the fleeting charm of youth, a steadfast love woven from trust, tenderness, and an unwavering desire to see her happy. But as much as he tried to share these feelings with her, she dismissed them with an air of indifference, brushing aside his efforts with an almost careless disregard. Her subtle rejection cut deeper than any sharp word, making him feel as though his most earnest gestures of love were empty, worthless offerings she neither valued nor wanted. It was as if he was failing in some unspoken way, unable to measure up to her impossible standards. A sense of desperation took hold of him, growing with each passing day. He clung to the hope that he could somehow prove his worth, that he could still win her approval and, perhaps, her love. Drawing on the last reserves of his courage and faith, he looked into her eyes one evening and told her, with all the sincerity he could muster, that he might lack the energy of younger men, but his love was boundless, his dedication unwavering. He wanted her to understand that he held something unique, an ability to cherish her, to support her, to offer her a kind of love that no fleeting passion could ever rival. In his heart, he believed she would see this as a sign of his devotion, a testament to the depth of his feelings for her. But instead of seeing his vulnerability and understanding the courage it took for him to express his heart so openly, she laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh that shattered him. Her laughter held no warmth, no affection, only a biting edge that made him feel small, as though he was an object of pity. She ridiculed his words with cruel, unfiltered mockery, sneering at what she saw as the pitiful attempt of an aging man struggling to hold on to relevance. The way she looked at him, the way she laughed without restraint, was a merciless blow. Her disdain cut him down to the core, stripping him of his dignity, reducing him to a shadow of the man he once was. He felt humiliated, not just as her partner, but as a man, as if his very worth had been obliterated in a single instant. Every ounce of pride, every last remnant of self-respect, seemed to crumble under the weight of her scorn, leaving him raw and exposed in a way he had never felt before. Yet even in the face of such unbearable pain, he clung to the belief that this was merely a trial, a test of his love. He told himself that true devotion could endure anything, that if he could only be patient and steadfast, she might one day recognize the value of his unwavering loyalty, the depth of his sacrifices. He held on to the hope that if he continued to show her his love, if he kept proving himself day after day, she would eventually see the worth in what he offered her. But as the weeks bled into months, that hope began to wither, shrinking in the cold light of reality. He searched her face for some sign of warmth, some flicker of the affection she had once shown him. But all he saw was a wall of indifference, a detachment that made him feel invisible, like he had been relegated to the background of her life. The harsh truth began to settle over him, a truth he had fought so hard to deny. He began to question everything, wondering if he had deceived himself from the beginning, if he had given his heart to a woman incapable of loving him back. The realization was devastating, a blow that left him feeling hollow, as though he had lost a part of himself that he could never reclaim. In those quiet, lonely moments when the silence seemed to press in on him from every side, he found himself reflecting on everything he had given up, every sacrifice he had made, every piece of his heart he had laid bare for her. All of it, he realized, had been for nothing. She had taken it all and discarded it, treating his love as though it was worthless, an unwanted burden she had been forced to bear. The heartbreak was profound, a wound that cut so deep he feared it would never heal. And yet, a small part of him still clung to the faint hope that, one day, she would understand the depth of his love, that she would finally see what he had given her. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. But with each passing day, that hope grew dimmer, and a painful clarity began to emerge, a realization that the dream he had been clinging to was nothing more than a cruel illusion. All he had left was the raw, bitter truth of his vulnerability, a truth that stripped him bare and left him feeling more fragile than he had ever felt in his life. Each word she spoke, each cutting remark, each dismissive glance, felt like a dagger, chipping away at his self-worth, eroding his confidence, pushing him further into a dark abyss of self-doubt and despair. She had reduced him, little by little, to a shell of the man he once was, stripping away layers of his dignity until he felt like nothing more than a hollow figure, a fading presence in her life. He began to see himself through her eyes, not as a man of value, but as an aging shadow, a relic of the past that held no meaning in her present or future. He realized that, in her mind, he had become irrelevant, an inconvenient reminder of something she no longer desired. He had tried so hard to hold on to his sense of worth, to remind himself of the man he used to be, but her constant disdain, her relentless disregard, had left him doubting his own identity. He was left adrift in a sea of loneliness, haunted by the memory of who he once was and the painful awareness that he might never find that part of himself again. Her rejection had left a void within him, an emptiness that swallowed his joy, his pride, his very sense of self. And in that void, he felt the unbearable weight of loss, the loss of a love he had once believed in so fiercely, and the loss of himself in the process. To those listening to this story, it might seem tempting to wonder aloud, why didn't he just walk away? It's a fair question, but it overlooks the reality of love, especially the kind of love felt by someone who has spent a lifetime giving and receiving it. Love can hold us in its grasp with an indescribable power, a pull that sometimes binds us to the very things that wound us the most. When love becomes entangled with a deep, almost desperate need for acceptance and validation, it can make us cling to what we might once have walked away from without a second thought. He wasn't bound solely to her youthful beauty or her charm anymore. He was bound to a fragile, aching hope that he could somehow prove himself worthy of her love, that he could make her see him as enough despite the years that lay between them. He was chasing an illusion, a dream that she might eventually see beyond the signs of age on his face, beyond the gray in his hair and the slowing steps in his walk. He thought that if he loved her enough, if he devoted himself entirely, showing her his worth in every way he could, she would finally recognize the treasure of experience and loyalty that his years had shaped. He longed for her to see the richness within him, the wisdom and depth that only time could carve into a soul. But the more he surrendered himself to this fantasy, the deeper he sank into the illusion, and the harsher her words cut, each one carving away another piece of his pride. Each dismissive glance, every ridiculing laugh chipped away at his self-worth, distancing him further and further from the man he once knew himself to be. Then came that evening, a hauntingly quiet night, dark and still, after another harsh exchange. She looked at him with that same cold disdain, a look that had become all too familiar, one that seemed to diminish him further with every passing second. In the silence that followed, he found himself alone in the dim light, turning to face his own reflection. There in the mirror, he saw a man marked by time, creased by years of laughter and loss, joy and sorrow. He saw the eyes of someone who had once carried himself with confidence and pride, eyes that now appeared clouded, heavy with sadness and disappointment. And in that moment, he felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in far too long: self-respect, fighting its way back to the surface. He realized, perhaps for the first time in ages, that he could no longer endure living in the shadow of someone who refused to see him for who he truly was. He knew then that he deserved more than this constant cycle of belittling and rejection. That night marked a pivotal moment in his life, a night that would change everything. Summoning the last remnants of his dignity, he made a decision to confront her, approaching her with a calm strength he didn't even realize he still possessed. His voice was steady, his words filled with a quiet conviction that caught her by surprise. He told her simply and sincerely that he could no longer bear the pain of staying in a place where he felt so small, so diminished. He told her that as much as he had loved her, he was ready to let go, to reclaim the respect he owed himself. His words, spoken with sincerity and clarity, seemed to cut through the air, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, a recognition of the strength she had underestimated. For that brief, powerful moment, he reclaimed a part of himself that had been lost in every hurtful remark, every dismissive laugh, every cold look that had made him feel less than he was. Their conversation was raw, filled with honesty that had been buried for far too long beneath layers of hurt and longing. And though it was painful, it was also freeing, a release from the illusion that had held him captive, a shattering of the chains he had willingly placed on his own heart. Walking away from her that night was not just a step out of a toxic relationship. It was an act of reclaiming his own dignity, a commitment to himself that he would no longer settle for validation from someone who could not see his worth. As he left, his heart was heavy with the weight of what he had endured, yet unburdened by the freedom he had found in letting go. He stepped into the night with a sense of quiet relief, ready to rediscover the man he once was, the man who had been hidden beneath years of seeking someone else's approval. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt that he was finally embodying the true wisdom of his age. His years were not signs of weakness or irrelevance, but of strength, resilience, and a depth that only time could shape. He knew now that he had a life worth living, a love worth sharing, perhaps one day, with someone who could appreciate the beauty of a heart that had grown richer with time, rather than seeing it as a relic of the past. And in that moment, he found a peace he hadn't known in years, a peace that came from knowing that he was finally free to be himself, loved or unloved, whole and worthy all on his own. He stood there, taking a long, steady breath, feeling the profound weight of the decades he had lived, the experiences he had endured, and the countless lessons life had given him. In that still, quiet moment, he finally grasped the immense value that lay within him, a value that had absolutely nothing to do with the lines on his face or the years he had collected. He felt a surge of pride, not born from anyone else's approval, but from a deep personal recognition of the man he had become, a man who had walked through both joy and sorrow, carrying memories and insights that no one could ever diminish or take away. As he turned and stepped out of her home and into the cool night air, he was met with an overwhelming sense of relief, a powerful release from the invisible burden he had carried for so long. The months of quiet self-doubt, the erosion of his confidence, and the hollow feeling of inadequacy all seemed to lift with each step he took. He had come to understand something that would carry him forward. Some people simply cannot look past the surface. They cannot or will not grasp the depth, wisdom, and beauty that come with a life well lived. And as painful as that truth was, it was also freeing. He realized that by staying in a place where he was consistently devalued, he had allowed his own light to dim, had accepted shadows where he could have stood in his own bright truth. But in choosing himself that night, in walking away with his head held high, he reclaimed more than his dignity. He rediscovered the peace that comes with loving oneself, a love no one else could ever diminish. The days that followed were not easy, nor free from challenges. Loneliness, that old familiar shadow, crept back into his life, wrapping itself around his quiet moments. But this time, that solitude was different. It felt pure, untainted by the weight of judgment or the need to prove himself. It was a sanctuary, a quiet space where he could exist fully in his truth, unbothered by the opinions or expectations of others. In this stillness, he found a strength he had nearly forgotten. He realized that he was more than enough, that he carried an inherent worth no one could ever strip from him. He saw with clarity that his value wasn't tied to youthful energy or physical allure, but to the kindness, integrity, and resilience he offered the world. With each day that passed, his self-love grew stronger, solidifying into the very foundation upon which he began to rebuild his life. He understood now that true love is never something that belittles, controls, or diminishes. True love uplifts, respects, and honors the essence of who we are, flaws and all. As he looked back on his time with her, he began to recognize the hidden gift within all that pain. Life had given him a lesson that only years could fully reveal, that not every dazzling allure is worth sacrificing one's dignity, and that love, the kind that truly matters, embraces without reservation, cherishes without condition, and sees beauty in the scars life leaves upon us. In the end, he emerged from this experience with a renewed sense of self-worth, an unshakable resilience that could not be broken. He walked forward carrying a profound understanding that he didn't need to chase after love or seek validation from anyone else. He had found it in the most enduring place of all, within himself. With this self-assurance, he felt a readiness to face whatever lay ahead, confident in the knowledge that he was enough, exactly as he was. Months rolled by, and in that time, he began to rediscover parts of life that had slipped into the background, forgotten in the shadow of his former relationship. The process was slow, but it was healing, transformative, a return to the vibrant life he had once known. He began reaching out to old friends, reconnecting with people who welcomed him back with open arms and genuine smiles. Each reunion brought warmth to his heart, a reminder of the strong, meaningful bonds that had shaped him long before the fleeting romance that had left him wounded. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. He found himself laughing again, wholeheartedly, as he and his friends shared memories, some hilarious, others tinged with nostalgia, but all cherished pieces of the rich tapestry of his life. In these friendships, he rediscovered a sense of belonging that asked for nothing, demanded nothing but sincerity, and offered only acceptance in return. And in the safety of these connections, he felt truly seen and appreciated for who he was, without judgment or expectation. With a newfound sense of freedom, he also began to rekindle old dreams, adventures he had postponed for years. He traveled to places he had long imagined, destinations that had once felt unreachable or reserved for another time. He wandered through bustling cities, walked along tranquil coastlines, and stood in awe before mountains and valleys that seemed to stretch forever. With every journey, he felt a quiet thrill, a renewed sense of wonder that he had once believed was reserved only for youth. In these travels, he realized that he was experiencing life with a kind of depth and richness only possible with the wisdom of his years. He was no longer just seeing these places. He was feeling them, embracing them, finding joy in the simplicity of being present. And as he looked over each landscape, each city street, each quiet sunset, he knew that he had found a new chapter, one he could write entirely on his own terms. Looking back, he understood now that his age was not a limitation but a source of power, a testament to the life he had lived, the love he had given, and the resilience he had found. He had discovered that he was more than enough, and that his worth was defined not by someone else's approval, but by his own unwavering commitment to himself. And with that wisdom, he walked forward into his future, embracing the truth he had long sought, that he was whole, worthy, and in every sense, complete, just as he was. Each new place he visited gifted him a chance to pause, to breathe deeply, and to marvel at the vast, boundless beauty of the world. Standing on the shore of a distant ocean he had only dreamed of or gazing out from the summit of a mountain that had once seemed unreachable, he felt a profound gratitude swell within him for the richness of his life, for all the moments that had shaped him. These experiences reminded him of his boundless capacity for joy, a joy that blossomed far from the critical gaze of those who only saw him through the lens of age. Back at home, he began to reclaim the simple passions that had once brought him peace and fulfillment. He took up his old guitar, the worn wood familiar and comforting beneath his fingers. The strings hummed beneath his touch, each chord a reminder of a time when he had found solace in music. He picked up a paintbrush he had set aside long ago, and in gentle strokes, he let his creativity flow, watching the colors blend and come alive on the canvas. His shelves, filled with books he had never had the time to read, became a world to escape into, each story offering him the gift of adventure, wisdom, and perspective. These small, simple pleasures began to rekindle a spark within him, a deep contentment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval or admiration. Each hobby, each quiet moment spent immersed in something he loved, was a gentle affirmation of his own worth, a reminder that he was whole and complete in himself. It was in these moments that he saw clearly, for the first time, that he didn't need anyone to tell him he was valuable. He could feel it, see it, and cherish it for himself. Through these quiet acts of self-discovery, he grew to understand a powerful truth. His worth was never bound to someone else's validation, and certainly not to someone who saw only his surface. He no longer needed the fleeting admiration of a younger woman to validate his value. Instead, he saw his worth in the quiet strength he had accumulated over the years, in the wisdom woven into each wrinkle and strand of silver hair. Each line etched into his face held a story, each gray hair a testament to a life lived fully, each a symbol of lessons learned and challenges overcome. Aging, he realized, wasn't about losing vitality or becoming less. It was a journey that enriched him with every passing day, bringing clarity and meaning to the things that truly mattered. With this newfound clarity, he no longer felt compelled to sacrifice his own happiness to fit into someone else's vision of who he should be. He redirected his energy inward, nurturing his own joy and embracing the peace that came from pure self-acceptance. He found pleasure in the simple act of being present, at ease, and fully himself, without fear of judgment or the need to conform to anyone's expectations. His years had taught him a profound truth. He didn't need to change himself to fit into anyone else's mold. He was enough, just as he was. Each step he took on his path towards self-contentment was a reminder that true happiness wasn't something he had to earn from someone else. It was something he could cultivate within himself. For others who, like him, are in the later chapters of life and facing the uncertainty of self-worth in a world that often worships youth, his story became a beacon of quiet strength. The pursuit of love and connection is indeed beautiful and enriching, but it should never come at the cost of one's inner peace or self-respect. Love, he realized, should never require someone to sacrifice their dignity or shrink themselves to meet another's expectations. This wisdom was a gift of age, a clarity that could only be reached through the passage of time. He had come to understand the irreplaceable value of self-respect, the necessity of preserving one's dignity, even when enticed by promises that seem dazzling but ultimately fade. This was his newfound truth, a lesson earned through experience and reflection. In his solitude, he discovered a profound sense of purity, a calm that was free from the weight of anyone else's expectations. The loneliness that had once felt like a burden now felt dignified, a sanctuary where he could simply be himself, unencumbered by judgment or criticism. There was no one to impress, no standard to meet other than his own. He existed in a space where he could reconnect with his own soul, listening to the quiet rhythm of his own heart, knowing that he was enough without anyone's validation. He was a man of worth, a man who held within him a capacity for love, kindness, and understanding that no one could take away. He walked forward into this new chapter of life, carrying with him a deep assurance that he was complete in himself, that he held within him all he needed to live a life of meaning, fulfillment, and peace. He was free, and in that freedom, he had found his truest, most enduring source of happiness. This journey of self-discovery and healing brought him to a profound and lasting peace, a peace that was no longer contingent upon the opinions or approval of anyone else. In searching for love outside himself, he had ultimately discovered something far more enduring, a love that needed no validation from anyone, a self-love that was pure and constant, unshaken by external forces. This self-love became the foundation upon which he rebuilt his life, a wellspring of strength that allowed him to move forward with a quiet, unbreakable confidence. Through his experiences, he had come to realize that not every captivating smile or alluring charm was worth sacrificing his dignity for. True love, he now knew, was anchored in acceptance, respect, and unwavering support, whether that love was directed toward oneself or another. True love does not demand proof or ask anyone to diminish themselves to fit another's expectations. Instead, it recognizes and honors the inherent worth that has always existed. In the end, he emerged from this chapter of his life not as a broken man but as someone renewed, with a profound and enriched understanding of his own value. He carried within him the knowledge that his worth was never something anyone else could bestow upon him or take away. It was a truth that had always existed within him, patiently waiting for his own recognition and embrace. For those who hear his story, may it stand as a beacon of hope and wisdom. Let it remind each of us that self-love and dignity are treasures that grow richer with time, that one's value is not diminished by the passing years but rather is enhanced by them. He walked forward into his next chapter, whole and content, realizing that the love he had been seeking all along was already within him. And that love, immune to the opinions or judgments of others, was the greatest gift he could ever give to himself. Looking back on his journey, he saw this relationship not simply as a romantic chapter but as a profound and transformative experience, one that had taught him resilience, acceptance, and the unwavering importance of honoring his own values above all else. This relationship had been like a mirror, forcing him to confront his worth and acknowledge the deep-rooted need to love himself fully, flaws and all. He came to realize that to truly be loved by another, he first had to accept and embrace every part of himself, from his imperfections to his unique strengths. Ending the relationship had been one of the hardest decisions he had ever made, yet it was an act of reclaiming his identity, a powerful assertion that his self-worth was non-negotiable. For those watching his story unfold, it serves as a reminder that self-love is not just valuable, it is essential, especially in a world that can sometimes feel intent on undermining our confidence and dignity. Only those with years of lived experience, those who understand the true weight of time and the intrinsic value of dignity, can fully appreciate the depth of his story. Aging gracefully, he realized, brings a quiet strength, a hard-earned dignity that cannot be feigned or borrowed. He had learned that the measure of a person's worth is not defined by their age or their appearance, but by the integrity with which they face life's challenges. Each line on his face, every strand of gray in his hair, became more than mere markers of passing years. They were badges of resilience, symbols of wisdom earned through a lifetime of facing both joy and sorrow with honesty and self-respect. Drawing from his journey, he felt compelled to share the wisdom he had gained, hoping that it might serve others who, like him, may be struggling with relationships in their later years. He outlined 5 valuable lessons he believed could help those seeking guidance in navigating the complexities of love, self-worth, and aging. The first lesson was to remember that while the idea of rekindling youth with a younger partner may seem alluring, it's vital to remain grounded and true to oneself, resisting the temptation to lose oneself in the illusion of youth. As he experienced, many people end up giving their time, energy, and love to someone who may never truly value them. The desire to prove one's vitality or capture the feeling of youth can lead to the sacrifice of self-respect, sometimes leading people to accept humiliations they would never have tolerated in their younger years. Real love is not about proving one's worth. It's about creating a space of mutual respect, where both individuals are valued and respected for who they are, at every stage of life. The second lesson was that true love never requires someone to diminish or compromise their self-worth. Instead, it's about creating a safe space where both partners feel seen, valued, and honored. Love, he realized, should be a sanctuary, a place where each person can be fully themselves without fear of judgment. In a relationship grounded in mutual respect, age becomes irrelevant, as each person is cherished for their essence, not their appearance or physical energy. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. The third lesson he had learned was the unshakable importance of self-love as the foundation of any healthy relationship. Without a strong foundation of self-respect, any relationship is likely to fall into patterns of seeking validation and approval, an exhausting cycle that leaves little room for genuine happiness. Only when he embraced his inherent worth did he find the freedom to love others without losing himself in the process. Self-love became his anchor, a compass that guided him toward relationships that honored rather than diminished him. The fourth lesson was to see aging not as a loss but as an accumulation of gifts. Aging gracefully, he realized, meant embracing the resilience, wisdom, and clarity that come with each passing year. Instead of seeing the years as something to hide or deny, he began to view them as sources of strength and depth. He saw that each wrinkle, each gray hair, held a story, a lesson, a memory that had shaped him into the person he was. True wisdom, he learned, comes from understanding and honoring the beauty in aging, from allowing oneself to grow and evolve without clinging to the superficial aspects of youth. Finally, the fifth lesson he shared was the realization that happiness is a deeply personal journey, a destination that no one else can lead you to. By reclaiming his self-worth and choosing a path that prioritized his peace and contentment, he had found a kind of happiness that no relationship could provide. Happiness, he discovered, is not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is something cultivated within, through choices that honor one's values and foster self-respect. Happiness is a state of being that grows from the seeds of self-love, nurtured by moments of solitude and self-reflection. For those who find themselves questioning their self-worth or seeking validation outside themselves, his story stands as a reminder that true contentment lies in the quiet acceptance of who we are. Through his experience, he learned that he didn't need someone else to tell him he was valuable, nor did he need to change himself to be worthy of love. He was complete, whole, and worthy in his own right, just as he was. This understanding became his legacy, a testament to the transformative power of self-love and the unassailable value of living in alignment with one's truth. With each passing day, he continued to rediscover life's simple joys, the quiet pleasures that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. He spent time with old friends, rekindling the connections he had neglected in the pursuit of an unsustainable love. He found comfort in his hobbies, the ones he had set aside, and allowed himself to dream once more, free from the weight of judgment or expectation. This time, his journey was his own, led by his own desires, his own joy, his own peace. And as he walked forward into this new chapter, he knew that his life would not be defined by anyone else's standards or opinions. He was enough, exactly as he was, and he would carry that knowledge with him, cherishing it as the greatest gift he could give himself. The second lesson that emerges from his story is a profound and often challenging realization about the necessity of self-love, a concept we frequently talk about yet may struggle to fully embrace. For him, accepting the relentless, cutting remarks about his age and abilities wasn't just a matter of enduring harsh words. It was like handing over pieces of his very soul, slowly allowing his sense of self to be chipped away. These weren't merely comments. They were direct assaults on his spirit, on his identity, making him question his own worth and value in ways he had never anticipated. Initially, he convinced himself that enduring these slights was a form of loyalty, a testament to his commitment. He believed that by staying in the relationship and absorbing the criticisms, he was somehow being noble, patient, and selfless. But as time passed and the hurt became too much to bear, he began to see a painful truth. This wasn't nobility, it was self-abandonment. In his attempt to mold himself into someone else's ideal, he had sacrificed pieces of his dignity and self-respect, piece by piece. Self-love, he realized, is not something to be compromised or bartered, not even for the sake of love. It is a foundation that must be established and steadfast before entering any relationship, a foundation that protects our deepest sense of self-worth. When we cultivate self-love, we create an inner strength that shields us from being overly vulnerable to others' opinions, judgments, and even their unkindness. Without self-love, we risk seeing ourselves through the critical eyes of those around us, slowly adopting their disapproval and contempt as parts of our own self-image. We must recognize our intrinsic worth, not only during joyful times but especially when faced with adversity. For him, this lesson became a hard-won truth, a revelation that his self-worth should never have been contingent on someone else's validation or acceptance. Self-love, he learned, was his armor, his guide, and his constant source of strength. The third lesson he discovered was the courage it takes to walk away, to declare, "I deserve better," and to confront the solitude that often follows such a decision. For him, choosing to leave the relationship wasn't just an ending, it was an act of profound self-reclamation. It was a statement to himself and the world that he valued his well-being, his dignity, and his self-respect above any relationship that sought to undermine them. It was a recognition that his self-worth could not thrive in a place where he was constantly devalued. Leaving was anything but easy. Walking away required him to confront his deepest fears: fear of loneliness, fear of the unknown, and fear of leaving behind the comfort of familiarity. But ultimately, it was the path of greater courage and deeper self-love. He chose solitude over the anguish of staying in a place where he felt unworthy and undervalued. He made the choice to honor himself, knowing that even if he felt lost or lonely at times, he would rather be alone than remain in an environment where his dignity was continually at stake. There's something powerful about solitude when it is chosen intentionally and with self-respect. Society often views being alone as a sign of failure or isolation, but he found that solitude was not a punishment, it was a sanctuary. In that quiet space, he could finally hear his own voice, a voice that had been silenced by the constant noise of someone else's criticism and doubt. This solitude became a refuge, a place where he could reconnect with himself, rebuild his sense of self-worth, and nurture his wounded heart. In the stillness of being alone, he began to find comfort in his own company, realizing that he could indeed be whole without the approval or presence of anyone else. He rediscovered the things he loved about himself, the quirks and qualities that had been dismissed or disregarded. He remembered the strength that had seen him through so many trials before, and realized that this time would be no different. The solitude that once seemed daunting was now a source of clarity, a gift that allowed him to reconnect with the essence of who he was and to cultivate a love that did not waver or require validation from anyone else. And so, this solitude was not merely an absence. It was a profound presence, a presence of self that he had almost forgotten existed. It was here, in the quiet, that he rebuilt himself piece by piece, free from the weight of judgment or expectation. He found that self-love, once cultivated, grew strong enough to dispel the shadows of doubt and insecurity, and he learned to stand tall in his own worth, knowing that he was complete just as he was. As he embraced this journey of healing and self-discovery, he realized that each step was a quiet yet powerful affirmation of his value, a testament to the resilience and dignity that come only from within. For him, the greatest lesson was that love, true love, whether from oneself or another, never requires a compromise of one's integrity. True love is a sanctuary, a place of acceptance and support, where both people feel valued and respected for who they are. And if that love isn't there, if it demands that one diminish their self-worth or sacrifice their dignity, then it isn't worth holding on to. For those who find themselves navigating similar struggles, his story serves as a reminder that self-love and dignity are treasures that grow richer with time. They are values that we cannot afford to compromise, for they are the very core of our being. His journey reminds us that solitude, when chosen with intention, is not a loss but a path to self-discovery and peace. It is a chance to reconnect with the self, to rebuild from within, and to learn that we are enough, exactly as we are. Solitude, he discovered, could be a deeply healing space, a place where he could slowly mend the fractures in his self-esteem and nurture a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. By choosing to walk away, he granted himself a rare and precious opportunity, the chance to rediscover the beauty and strength that had always resided within him, untouched by anyone else's approval or dismissal. In the quiet moments of being alone, he felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom, a release from the need to be seen or validated by another. This solitude became a sacred place, a time to reconnect with a calm and wholeness that no one else could either give or take away. He learned that solitude, when embraced with dignity, can be the most beautiful and fulfilling space one can occupy. It allowed him to step back and truly see his worth, to realize that his completeness was intrinsic, independent of anyone's validation. In the silence, he began to appreciate the richness of his own company. He could finally rebuild himself, piecing together the parts of his heart that had been worn down over time, reclaiming fragments of his spirit that had been surrendered in the hope of another's approval. Piece by piece, he restored himself until he could stand tall, not because anyone saw him as worthy, but because he finally saw his own worth. In this quiet time, he found strength he had forgotten, resilience that had been waiting patiently for him to recognize it again. His solitude became a mirror reflecting his courage, his wisdom, and his capacity for self-compassion. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest love we can offer ourselves is the courage to walk away from those who fail to see our value. Through his story, we see that sometimes solitude is not only a refuge but a necessary journey, a journey back to oneself, a path to reclaim one's dignity and self-worth, so that when the time comes, we can open our hearts again. This time, though, love will be rooted in strength, peace, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. As we come to the close of this heartfelt story and its transformative lessons, we invite you to reflect with us. What insights have you gained? What resonated most deeply with you? Share with us in the comments below one thing you learned here that you feel inspired to bring into your own life. Whether it's the value of self-love, the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you, or the quiet power of finding peace in solitude. Let us know how this story has touched you, and let us build a space of shared reflection, support, and resilience. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What insights have you gained from this story? What resonated most with you? Share one thing you've learned that you feel inspired to put into practice in your own life below in the comments. Let's build a supportive space where we can grow and learn together. If you found value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.